Oh, well, Ryan, this is the first time we are having to do this show off of a 49er loss. We knew this day would come eventually. I just don't think we thought it would come this early. We both talked about later in the season, the 3-game track against Seattle, Philly, Seattle. That was probably where the first loss would come. Yet here we are after a loss to the Cleveland Browns. We're going to talk about that loss, why it's not all bad, and our confidence level going forward. We're going to do all of that plus more next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. It's Tuesday afternoon, which means I've got my guy, Ryan G. Hensley, back in the building. Ryan, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing great, man. Good to see you. Sorry we missed last week. Good to be back. I saw you had Coach on, which is probably an upgrade over me, to be honest. But it's good to be back with you, brother. And yeah, man. And make sure you guys vote on the poll on my channel because I want to know who do you think is going to win one-on-one basketball. I saw Jesse shooting. If you go watch me shooting, if I saw Jesse dribbling, but if you go watch me shooting, that may persuade you. I don't know. Who do you think would win one-on-one basketball? Me versus Jesse. I want to know.
Yeah, it's totally fair. I think it's a fair question. I'm curious to see the results of the poll. If you guys are wondering, the tail of the tape, I mean, we're both roughly the same height. So there's not a difference there. We're both old and broken down. So there you go. There's
Hey,
your vote. You've got all the
speak for
information
yourself,
that
Jesse.
you
Speak for
need.
yourself, bro.
Yeah, Ryan still thinks he's got everything that he had in his 20s. Clearly delusional, Ryan. Clearly
The
delusional.
jumper is better than ever. The jumper is better than ever, Jesse.
You're much smarter than you were then. That's true. 43-year-old you can beat 22-year-old you, no problem. I can see
44.
that. 44.
44.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There we go. All right.
My fofo make sure all your shots don't go, Jesse.
All right.
So you know.
Oh God, it'd be a horrible brand of basketball, no doubt. All right, man. Let's get into these 49ers. The 49ers, do you get the feeling in hindsight, obviously, it's much easier to say this in hindsight after a loss, but do you get the feeling that the 49ers were just feeling themselves a little too much going into this game?
I think that's a huge possibility. Yeah, I mean, and I think it's hard not to when you win 5 games in a row or 15 in a row, honestly. So you start feeling yourself. I mean, obviously they lost to the Eagles, but they don't really count that one. Fan base doesn't really count that one. So for the 49ers, they won 15 in a row. I feel like, it's hard not to. So I kind of understand it. But yeah, maybe that was the reality, right? Like, I had a pinned tweet from Debo. He's on, to sounding like Grover talking about the 49ers look real good right now, like, and over and over again. And, they're feeling themselves. And it's understandable why they were. But I think this, in the long run, this loss could be a good thing because, everybody needs a little bit of humility and they got to know that they can be beat.
Yeah, I definitely think they were feeling themselves. And I don't even think that they shouldn't have been feeling themselves. I mean, they just beat the brakes off the Dallas Cowboys, who, I mean, we just watched Dallas beat the Chargers yesterday. Not that the Chargers are great, but there's certainly some talent over there. And, Dallas is a pretty good football team, but the difference between them and the 49ers on that day in particular was significant. And the 49ers were undefeated. They were scoring over 30 every game. They were holding opponents down to around 13 and a half points per game. Everything was going great. And then they've got a Cleveland team. Yes, on the road, early game, definitely some tough things there. But going against a quarterback that's been on the team for about a week, no Chubb, their best offensive lineman out, it just looked like it was a game they should have won. And really, kind of what I point to was the fight before the game where Debo was mocking them. They took exception to it. And then even the final catch of the game, the Jawan Jennings catch, the way he acted when he caught that ball, and as he went out of bounds, as if they had won the game, it just, you can tell that they were definitely feeling themselves. And I think as a fan base, we were feeling ourselves. I mean, let's keep it a buck. This wasn't just the 49ers. As fans, we were feeling untouchable. We were talking about undefeated seasons. When are the losses going to come? Well, if they happen, it'll be at week 12 through 14. Like, that's a maybe. A lot of things happened. Reality is no teams go undefeated. This is not the worst thing in the world. I'd rather get it out of the way now than, worry about it in the playoffs and have that pressure of being undefeated. And I think that everybody on the team kind of needed this. Hey, let's knock it down a peg, get back on track. Remember who we are. Know that we're still very, very good, but we can be beat. And so let's play with a sense of urgency, play in and play out. And that might be something that, had they not lost, they would have gotten away from. And maybe it would have bit them in the butt at a much more crucial time.
Yeah, you don't want to get bitten in the butt. Hey, Jess, I do have a question for you, brother. Like, I on the opposite side of the spectrum here.
Yeah.
Kyle was actually talking like really, not as optimistic as maybe the team thought they were. Do you think, because we saw Brock Purdy, he struggled a little bit. I think we'll probably talk about it. Do you think that got in his head? The fear, maybe some of the other team was overconfident, but do you think Brock was underconfident going into this game, and maybe that's why he was so off and bothered throughout the game?
I don't think so. When I look at Brock Purdy play in that game, I didn't look at a player that wasn't confident in himself. That was just me. I just think he was missing throws. Like, he just didn't have it. Sometimes you just show up and you don't have it. It happens to everybody. The best players in the world. We can go back to basketball. I mean, as great as Steph Curry is, there are nights that he shows up and shoots 6 for 24. It's like, well, not his best night, but it happens.
Yeah.
And it's not a confidence thing. He doesn't lack confidence. He's probably going to bounce back just fine. But I didn't look at that game as Brock Purdy not being confident. Now, I do want to go to the comments about Shanahan, which initially you'd brought up. That was an interesting approach, that he tried to bring. And I don't know. Here's the thing. The wording from the announcers could be very different than what he was telling his team. The way that I view he was probably telling his team was, hey, yes, last week we blew this team out. We've been blowing all these guys out. But this 30 points a game and just running away with these games at the end, don't expect that this week. This team is here to fight. They've got a great defense. The weather's not going to be great. Just be ready for a fight. And if you blow them out, great, but don't expect to blow them out. Just expect to fight tooth and nail, and also expect to win. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that when trying to tell your team. And really what that does tell me is that the answer to this question of the ultimate question, were they feeling themselves? I think Kyle was sensing that they were feeling themselves a little bit too. And as a leader and the coach of this team, he was trying to bring back those expectations. Unfortunately, there's a difference in being told and learning from other people's mistakes and learning from your own mistakes. And I think that's exactly what happened on Sunday. Kyle potentially saw this coming a little bit, not the loss necessarily, but that things aren't always going to be as good as they are. He's been around the league for a long time, coached a lot of good teams, seen those good teams lose to teams that they shouldn't lose to. And he tried to get his team ready for it. And there was nothing necessarily that he could do to prepare them by telling them. They had to find out for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah. Purdy didn't look like himself to me. And I understand the defense is, phenomenal. I put out the statistics on the defense of the Browns and what they've been able to do. They're only allowing 125 passing yards per game coming into that game. And that's exactly what Brock got, is 125 yards. He just looked off to me. Even before it started raining, he was just off. And it's not what I'm used to seeing from Brock Purdy. He's usually more accurate than that. So I was just wondering why. Like, why did you come into this game inaccurate even before it started raining? But
well, and I mean, truth be told, it rained in the first half. Like the game didn't start with rain. Then there was rain for about, I don't know, a quarter or so. And then there was no rain in the second half. Like, what happened in the second half was not due to rain. It was not raining anymore. So, that is not the reason why things happened the way that they did. But again, I don't look at it as Brock wasn't confident. I didn't see a player that wasn't confident. That's just me. Maybe somebody saw it different. We'll talk more about Brock
Cool.
as we go forward. Before we
Cool.
get to this next topic, let me get to Joey Mellons. He says the pressure of being undefeated has left the chat. That's
That's
true.
nice. It's
That's
actually
true.
it is actually nice, Jesse. Like I've
It
coached
is.
basketball for a long time, and had really most of my teams won a lot of games, and I've had periods where I won 18 games in a row, and it feels it's extra pressure when you finally lose. That pressure is off your shoulders. Believe it or
Mhm.
not, it actually is. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, most certainly. Jim, how are those Rams doing? I haven't checked in on them lately. I would assume their season's going pretty good. They're going to win the division, right? It'll be them and the 49ers that like week 18 games and be super
Good old
important.
Jim. Good old
Uh,
Jim.
nah, Jim. I actually don't mind Jim.
I like him.
All right,
Yeah.
all right. Let's talk overall about the team. We'll get to Brock separately. We'll keep him separate. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as the team overall, are you concerned or are you confident, and why?
I'm not concerned at all. Honestly, this is still the best to me. I mean, maybe the Eagles, maybe the Dolphins have offensively, they have better weapons. Maybe the Eagles overall. I don't know, but this is a top 2 or 3 team, if not the best team in the NFL when it comes to a roster. Now, I'm a little concerned with some of the injuries that came up. Hopefully, Trent's fine. Hopefully, Debo's fine. Still haven't heard from this mysterious MRI on CMC, by the way. That does concern me. But overall, no, I'm not really concerned about the 49ers. They're going to make the playoffs. And what really matters in the NFL is A, you got to make the playoffs, and B, you got to be hot when you make the playoffs. The 49ers are going to make the playoffs. That would be catastrophic if they didn't, right? I don't see a way that happens. So
No.
the 49ers are going to make the playoffs, and it's just a matter of getting hot at the right time. And you don't want to peak too early. And so this humbleness, week 6, it might be a good thing. But am I concerned? No, I'm definitely confident in the 49ers. I think they go and bounce back hard against Minnesota.
Yeah, I agree. I think Minnesota is kind of what the doctor ordered. Like, you talk about a slump buster, that's the Minnesota Vikings. Their defense is awful, awful
Yeah.
defense. And they're used to the only reason they've been competitive this year really is they're getting in these shootouts, and they had an offense that could certainly put up points. Well, now Jefferson's not playing. So they're not going to, the way that they were used to playing these teams, they can't do anymore. They're not a great running team. So it's not like the time of possession is a thing of concern. Their
Right.
defense isn't stopping much of anything. And I think, to me, there's a big difference in what happened on Sunday versus what could happen on Monday. So let's assume that CMC is not playing, and that will be a topic later. But there's a big difference in losing a player that was a part of the game plan mid-game and knowing they're not going to play and game planning around them. Like, those are very different things. Now, that doesn't mean that Kyle Shanahan shouldn't adjust his game plan. Like, he's a head coach. These things happen. He should be ready. But just as a whole, the team, you only have a certain amount of practice reps throughout the week and a certain amount of preparation that can be made. And so if a player that is a huge part of your game plan goes out, now somebody else has to come in. They don't have the same skill set. You have to make adjustments. That is much harder to do than knowing you're going to be without this player and game planning without them. So I'm not necessarily concerned. I'm certainly not concerned about this week against Minnesota. They better beat the Vikings. I don't care if Debo and CMC aren't playing, or CMC and Trent Williams are. I don't care. They better beat the Vikings, and they better be able to put up points, because this defense is atrocious. You have a week to game plan, over a week to game plan. So I'm not concerned about Minnesota. Really, the only concern is the injuries, which you talked about. But also, none of these are long-term injuries that we know of. Assuming CMC, I mean, who knows what's going on there. I would think worst case scenario, he goes on IR, which wouldn't be ideal, but we're talking 4 missed weeks. I would expect that everybody for the long run of this season is going to be there. And most likely 2 of the 3 are going to play this Monday. CMC will probably miss, would be my guess right now. So I'm not overly even concerned about the injuries.
Yeah, and I'm a little surprised by our guy, what is it, Giants Niner fan in here says he's concerned about the defense. Yeah, man, I would not be worried about this defense. So right now, the 49ers are 10th in passing yards given up, 6th in rushing yards given up, but they're number 1 in interceptions, and they're number 1 in points allowed. So they're not allowing people to score points. The number 1 in the NFL. I mean, the defense is the least of your worries. When we're talking about concerns, it would be from an offensive standpoint. But honestly, I don't really have many concerns. As long as these guys are healthy, I think they're going to bounce back. That Browns defense is historically good. They've allowed the third fewest yards since 1970. The third fewest yards since 1970 that Browns defense has allowed. They've only given up 125 through the air to quarterbacks all season. Like Burrow had 82 yards. So this was a really tough matchup. The 49ers are going to bounce back. The Vikings defense is buns. They're going to be okay on Monday night.
Yeah, and Jim Everett says the Browns gave the blueprint, and the blueprint is fine, but you have to have the horses to get it done. There's not many teams that can go man across the board with 3 corners that can play on most receivers in the league and hold their own, along with a very, very good pass rush that can get home with 4 players. There's not that team might just be the Browns. And that's it. That's end of conversation. The only team in the league that can possibly do that game in and game out. Yeah. That is the one team, and that's who they play. So they gave a blueprint, but who else can execute that?
Step 1 on the blueprint is get those players. So you got to do that first, which you're not going to be able to do.
Yeah, not this year, anyways.
It does concern me with the Eagles, though. I will be honest that the Eagles defense kind of similar to the Browns. I mean, they're not on the level. Obviously, the Browns are better, but it did. I think it might have helped out the Eagles a little bit to see how the Browns approach the 49ers.
I actually think the team that I thought would give the 49ers the most problems defensively was the Seattle Seahawks, and I think they absolutely can run with that blueprint. They've got the corners, they've got the safeties, so the secondary's locked in tight. Now, they don't have necessarily the pass rush, which can make things harder, but when you're just talking about pure coverage skills, they've got that. I mean, they've got everything across the board that can cover the 49ers player for player. So that's one team that I think might be able to execute, although in order for them to execute, they might have to send a 5th rusher, which then really puts pressure on that secondary to be perfect. So, maybe not to the level of the Browns, but I could see them being able to execute a big chunk of that game plan for sure.
Yeah, and Brock's shown to be fine against when you bring a 5th man. When it's when you're rushing 4 and then you got aggressive man coverage. That's when he struggles so far.
Yeah, most certainly. Real talk, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about Brock Purdy. I think, obviously this is going to be a huge topic this week, and we knew this was coming. It's funny because I put together a bunch of clips of me praising Brock Purdy and put them out yesterday. It was received with mixed emotions, I would say, but either way, one thing that did come from that, Ryan, was a couple shows that you and I did together where we kind of warned about this. We talked about this and said, hey, Brock, when he struggles, because every player does at some point, make sure that you don't jump off the bandwagon. That's when you've got to support him more than ever. And it was in particular one of the shows that we did this offseason, which was advice for the 49ers and advice for Brock Purdy and what they should do going forward. And we gave a lot of advice during that one. Actually, a lot of it came true. The 49ers have done a great job of handling the situation up to and including having him be a team captain, promoting him in every video that you can, trading Trey, all those things. But we know that a lot of people live week to week in this league. I mean, you see a quarterback, Justin Herbert is this week's target. He played on prime time, so of course everybody watched it. Now all of a sudden he sucks. Last week Dak sucked. Week 1 Josh Allen sucked. People live week to week. So don't stop living week to week. And I understand that it can be easy to do that with Brock Purdy, who hasn't played a lot of football. Like if there's a player that you're going to live week to week with, it would be more a guy like Brock Purdy or a rookie quarterback, maybe than an established player who you know is very good. But even then, you shouldn't have these major ups and downs. Like be consistent. It's fine. It was a rough week, a very rough week, but it's not the end of the world, at least in my opinion. So I'm not super panicked about Brock Purdy, but I think there's definitely some things there that need to be cleaned up that I think have always been there, and they finally just showed through about as bad as they could this game. But overall, my panic level on Brock, because I do think he's very confident and because I have seen him play very well with weapons around him, is not that high. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd put it at like a 2. What about you with Brock Purdy? Where's your panic level?
Yeah, I'm not panicked about Brock Purdy. I have all his statistics. You know, I do this every Tuesday morning.
Yeah,
so
every Tuesday. Yep.
It's kind of nice because then we come on the show and I can talk about it. Let me read this off if that's okay.
Yeah. Let's do it.
I think it kind of paints a clear picture of where he's at right now. So Brock Purdy's numbers after week 6. He's 22nd in completion. So I rank them and then I tell you how many he has and whether he's trending up or down. So he's 22nd in completions with 110, which is down from the previous week. He's 23rd in attempts with 163, which is up from the previous weeks. His completion percentage dropped a ton. It went from 2nd to 12th. He's now at 67.5, so it went down. Yards, he's 11th overall with 1,396, which is down. Average, he's 2nd with 8.6 per completion, which is the same. He's still 2nd. Yards per game, 14th with 232.7 yards per game, is down. His long pass of the game, you know, this is kind of dumb because it could, you know, it's about the longest pass. What not air yards, it's just like the longest pass. It could have been Ayuk running for 80 or him throwing for whatever. But anyways, he's 35th in the long pass category with a 42, which is down. He dropped down some spots. Passing touchdowns, he's 8th with 10. He's still tied for first. He did get one interception, but he's still tied for first. He's sacked. As far as getting sacked, he's 12th with 11 sacks. He's taken 11 sacks. His QBR, though, is still first after this performance, which is phenomenal. It's 76.9. And his rating dropped down one spot to 111.9. Tua took over. He's trending 3,955 yards on the season, 28 touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions. So that's where Brock Purdy's at. And that kind of, you know, you have to judge quarterbacks over like long periods of time, right?
I agree.
The accumulation, and this is kind of getting there now, right? We're after week 6. We've had 6 weeks of data this season, so you're kind of seeing where he falls, right? The 49ers, honestly, they don't ask him to pass that much. He's only 22nd in completions and 23rd in attempts. He's not asked to do a ton of passing, and he's kind of, you know, he's pretty accurate. His completion percentage is 12th in the NFL, which is pretty good. So we kind of just know who Brock Purdy is. He's not going to turn the ball over a lot, which is huge. One of the big factors for the 49ers why they're winning so much is they lead the NFL in takeaway differential. They're +8. They've taken away the ball 11 times, and they've only turned it over 3 times. This is a huge factor, and that's what Brock Purdy's asked to do. Come out here, find your weapons, get him the ball, don't turn the ball over. And I think he's one of the best in the league at that.
Yeah, most certainly. And, you know, much like last week where the numbers were really, really good, you're going to see a player go up, especially in a 6-game sample size. Last week was a 5-game sample size. When one of those games is as great as it was, you're going to see everything skyrocket. And then in a 6-game sample size, when one of those games is as bad as it was, you're going to see everything plummet a little bit, right? Like that's just the way that it works. So not a surprise that everything is trending down this week. I would imagine that things would kind of right size and go back to normal next week. But you're right. I mean, it is about accumulation, and it's not just about what this season looks like. It's an accumulation of what a career could look like. And that's why you need a lot of data before you make a decision, or at least I do. But when I look at what Brock Purdy can be this year, and the reason I'm not panicked is because the sample size of what he is with this group of weapons around him is all phenomenal. It was phenomenal last year. It's been phenomenal this year. So a couple weapons go out. I guess the only thing is like, hey, if you told me CMC is not going to play the rest of the year, my panic level would rise. Like instead of being at a 2, I'd probably be at a 6 or a 7. That's just being real.
Right.
But I don't expect that CMC is going to be out for a long stretch or won't be there for the end of the season. That's just the way that it is. So what I do know is with these players around him, he plays at an elite level. Like we were just talking about, possible MVP. If we were doing a quarterback power ranking, I know I had him in the top 3 for a quarterback power ranking. Doesn't mean that I think he's a top 3 quarterback, but for what he was doing this year, he was playing like a top 3 quarterback. So with these weapons and with this team and the way it's constructed, I have no reason to panic over Brock Purdy off of one game with guys that are likely going to be healthy soon. So no, my panic level is just not there. It's not.
Yeah, no reason to panic. It's one game. Every quarterback has a bad game. Burrow had 82 yards again. Burrow had 82 yards against that defense. So it's a historically great defense. I expect them to bounce back against Minnesota.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, and only one quarterback has played well against this defense.
Yeah, Lamar
Jackson.
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson. That was it. He was 15 and 19, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns, 27 rushing yards, and 2 more touchdowns. So Lamar Jackson is the guy that played very good against this defense. One quarterback. That's it. Now,
Lamar's cooking this year, by the way.
The other quarterbacks weren't good.
Yeah.
Burrow is the only other quarterback that was a noteworthy name that they've played against. He was awful week 1. People can say it was the calf injury. I don't know. If you're out there and playing, I feel like you're either good or you're not. And Burrow wasn't good. And, the Browns definitely held him in check big time as well. But the other ones were like Tannehill, not a good quarterback. A couple other guys that just,
Pickett did okay, believe it or not. He did okay. Well, he was like 50% completion rate, but he did have like 220 yards.
Yeah.
1 touchdown, 1 interception, kind of like Brock.
Yeah.
But Lamar's cooking this year, man. By the way, I think that we should mention that. Shout out to your son. He picks quarterbacks wisely, but yeah, he's balling right now.
He is a Lamar fan. He's chosen a good one for sure. GTC Reels says, "You want us fans to be rational and reasonable?" Nah.
Doesn't happen.
You're right. I might be asking too much. Kingston J says, "Sup, Oos?"
Sup, Oos? Yeah.
Hey,
Samoans.
real
Shout
talk.
out to my Samoans.
Talking Head says, "No reason to panic. In fact, I'm actually interested in seeing Purdy without CMC and possibly Debo. I still need to see if he's worth a big contract." Okay, let's talk about this for a second. I'm not interested in seeing it. I don't care. If they, eventually before you pay him, sure. But for this year, when they're trying to win a Super Bowl, I don't care. I don't care about what the long-term play is for Brock Purdy. That's off-season conversation. And I had that conversation plenty of times. Plenty of times I talked about what Brock Purdy is going to be long-term, what my thoughts are of him long-term, my concerns of him without the weapons. But right now in season, when they're trying to win a Super Bowl, and I think this team, including Brock Purdy, is good enough to get it done, I don't care to know the answer to that question. That's just me personally. I also think that beating a bad Minnesota team will not answer that question either. So to me, there's not a way of answering that question off of the Browns game and the Minnesota game. It's not enough data to me. Now, I do think we have the answer of who the catalyst of this offense is. For those that were questioning, is it Purdy or CMC? Well, we saw Jimmy Garoppolo, who was the best he's ever been in his entire career during that 4-game stretch with CMC. That's no coincidence. That team and all the games that he started and finished in the regular season are still undefeated with CMC, whether Jimmy was at quarterback or Brock Purdy was at quarterback. Brock Purdy, in every game that he started and finished, also been undefeated up until this last week, where coincidentally he didn't have CMC. So I think we have the answer of who the catalyst, if we're going to give one person all the credit of the offense, which is not realistic. A lot of people deserve credit, including Brock Purdy. But if you're going to choose who's the main cog, I think most people thought it was CMC, but now it's CMC. That doesn't mean that Brock Purdy looks like he did against the Browns week in and week out, and it's not a starting level quarterback without CMC, because I don't believe that at all. He looked like a player that should be holding a clipboard in this league against the Cleveland Browns. And I don't believe that's who he is. I still think he's a good quarterback. I think he's a starting level quarterback. I think Jimmy's a starting level quarterback, and I think Brock Purdy's better than Jimmy. So that means I think Purdy can start in this league for many years to come as well. Now, is he worth $50 million a year? I don't know. Time will tell. I don't care to find out the answer to that question this year, though. That's not what this year's about for me. What about you, Ryan?
I think I understand what Talking Head is saying. I get it. But yeah, this year, I mean, I just want to see him win a Super Bowl this year. That's really what I want to see. And then we'll figure that out next year. We still got a year and 12 games to worry about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Talking Head. Appreciate your contribution. Jimmy Kwan says the key to San Francisco to win it all is to get everyone involved. Niners have too many weapons for a team to shut them down. Kyle needs to figure it out.
I agree with this. I think they have been too heavily reliant on CMC. They need to mix it up more, get everyone involved. And that's going to prepare them for situations like when they face the Browns, like on Sunday. I've been saying this all year. I've been talking a lot about on Grant's channel. Like, we need to get everyone involved from the get-go, not just when you have to, right? Like, that way they're ready. It's kind of like, it reminds me of that Jimmy Garoppolo in the Super Bowl. You haven't asked him to throw deep all year, and then you need him to in the Super Bowl to win the game. And surprise, he can't do it because he doesn't do it all freaking year. Now, maybe he never would have been able to do it, but like, let's get George Kittle involved. Let's get everyone involved in this offense. Let's make it more even. Let's run Jordan Mason early and often. Like, let's do that. Like, I really want them to do that. I've been saying that for a while, and I think you saw it in the Browns game when CMC went down. It's like, oh, well, what do we do now? We don't have CMC. Like, yeah, if you've been more balanced throughout the year, then maybe you would have been a little bit more prepared for that. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny because during the game, Ryan, I didn't have a situation where I was like, gosh, damn it, Kyle, this is on you. And I don't want to be that guy in hindsight that completely changes my mind. And I haven't. And I'm going to talk about that on my show tonight with Kyle Shanahan. But there definitely is some room for improvement on that game for sure. And it's not really that game. It's more so kind of what you talked about, the season, where you have had opportunities to get people involved. Why has George Kittle been basically non-existent all season long outside of one game where he caught 3 touchdowns, did the FU Dallas t-shirt, all of that, which, by the way, is the thumbnail. Shout out to East Bay Chris for doing the Cleveland Browns. We lost to Cleveland t-shirt. But I mean, is Kittle really that washed? I don't believe that he is. I don't believe he's that washed. I think he's still a player in this league. He's just not getting involved. They're not getting him involved. And so that does eventually fall on Kyle. Absolutely, it does.
I think Kyle's a little bit comfortable with CMC. It's easy. It's the easy way to just dominate. And
sure.
He's kind of relying on it. And I don't necessarily blame him because, as a coach myself, I'm going to call it the play that works the easiest. It makes sense. But you have to think, I think, bigger picture. Sorry, my phone is blowing up today. You have to think bigger picture, like down the line and for the future a little bit sometimes. So when you're dominating teams like the 49ers have up until Sunday, that's when you got to start mixing it up and trying other things to prepare yourself for the long term down the road.
Yeah, most certainly. This team, before they got CMC last year, was only averaging about 18 points a game. And as soon as CMC got here, that skyrocketed. Then you throw Purdy in on top of that, it went up even more. But and we saw it again this year, 30, 30, 30, and it was just like feed CMC. Even the first drive of the game, nobody did anything. It was literally the CMC show. Everything was CMC. The whole drive was CMC. Just CMC, CMC, more CMC, more. The whole drive was CMC. Literally, like that's how they scored a touchdown. And then they couldn't move the ball because CMC, eventually got injured. They keyed in on CMC and there was just no other answers. They had no other answers. It's like, wow, you can see why maybe this team was only scoring 18 points a game without CMC, even though they had Kittle and Ayuk and Mitchell and Debo and all. Man, CMC has been this offense. It's crazy.
Kyle needs an intervention. He has a CMC addiction. He's got to kick that habit. He's got to mix everybody else, get him involved.
Maybe CMC missing a couple games is good long-term too for Kyle Shanahan and this team. Like
Yep.
remembering that this team is very talented. Even with let me put this out there. We talk about what this team is without Debo and CMC, right? It's not near as talented as what it is with those guys. But let's keep it a buck for a second. Let's go across a couple teams in this league. Let's put Ayuk, Kittle, and Mitchell or Mason, I prefer Mason, right? So I'm going to say Ayuk, Kittle, and Mason. If those are your top 3 weapons, let's put them up against the Baltimore Ravens, who have Gus Edwards, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews. I mean, I think we rank pretty favorably there.
Yeah.
That's what they deal with every week. That is their weapons. They're not without CMC and Debo. That's just their weapons. Josh Allen has James Cook, Stephon Diggs, and Gabe Davis. Well, I think even without CMC and Debo, like we're in line.
Right.
Mahomes is dealing with Isaiah Pacheco, Travis Kelce, and Rashee Rice. So, you know what I mean? Like the weapons are still good enough to where you should be able to put up points. And if CMC's out, that you're not just dead in the water and can't do anything with it. Correct. Like if you're as good as advertised, coach, you should be able to get it done. You've got a quarterback that you trust, deservedly so. He doesn't turn the ball over. So long term, I think this might actually be okay. This might not be a bad thing where you necessarily
learn to win without CMC.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for finishing that for me.
Yes,
because I lost my train of thought.
No, don't play him. I don't know. Like even if you can play, don't play him. He needs to rest. Like I don't want him to tough it out and play. Like stop, Kyle. Like give him a break. You've been running the hell out of the guy. Like give him a break. Win without CMC. You can beat the Vikings without CMC.
Yeah, they have an embarrassment of riches, and CMC is the ultimate rich for sure. Like he's the ultimate gem. I understand that, but man, you still have a lot of good players on this team that can do something.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that this team, before CMC was a thing, and Jimmy Garoppolo was coming off of an ACL in 2019, averaged 30 points a game. Okay, 29.9 points a game is what they averaged in 2019. That was with Jimmy G at quarterback, who we all agree is not as good as Purdy, and before CMC was even on this roster. Now, Raheem Mostert was very good, but he wasn't a thing until late in the season. Remember, he came on very late in that season and was there for the playoff push, but he was not the guy for a majority of that season. It was a lot of Coleman and a lot of Breida. Well, I don't know about you, but I think Mitchell and Mason are every bit as good as Coleman and Breida. You still have George Kittle. Ayuk is frankly better than any receiver they had on that team back then. Yeah. So like there's enough to get it done. You were able to score 29.9 points a game then. Now you've got a better quarterback. Your weapons are just as good as they were then. There's no reason that you can't.
It's an addiction. He's taking the easy route. Like win without CMC. I don't want him. Somebody in the chat just said Mayokos said it's about a pain tolerance now with CMC this weekend. If there's a possibility that he can feel pain, that means he's injured and he needs a break.
He needs a break. I agree. Give him a week, man. Yes. Give him a week. Play this smart. I do know this. He should not have gone back in that game. Yeah. And that much was clear based off of him coming out immediately. He shouldn't have been in that game. He couldn't handle the pain in the game. Why do you think it should be any different? You have enough weapons, and Debo's likely going to play. Debo is likely going to play, being it's a Monday night game. It sounds like it could be something similar to what Ayuk was dealing with. Ayuk, the difference is he missed a game because it was a Thursday night game. This is a Monday night game. I expect Debo to be there. So now I just took the weapons without Debo and compared them to some of the other teams in the league, and they compare favorably. Now you can add Debo in. You've got enough. You've got enough to score points against, again, a very, very bad Minnesota Vikings defense. There's no excuse. You can score the points. So I would say, no, don't play CMC. I would sit him minimum a week if I'm the 49ers, but that's just me.
I mean, you have opportunity to give him 3 weeks. Honestly, you can get him. If you rest him this week, you can rest him against the Bengals and then the bye week, and then he comes back fresh as hell, but maybe it's 3 weeks is overkill. It's unnecessary, but at least this week, please.
I give him this week because I think you should win the game and put up points without it against a bad defense. I'm okay with him playing against the Bengals, knowing that there's a bye week coming. So he'll get another couple weeks to kind of get right. And then, going at it for the long run. So, yeah, I would sit him if that's what it really is. Dave Barclay says, I came on and gave Kyle his flowers and then he choked. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Kyle's
Well,
doing good. I mean, here's the reality. Kyle is doing
I
a good
did. Yeah.
job, but we're nitpicking because he came off a loss, which is fine. I mean, we're analyzing the team, right? Brock Purdy's doing good overall. Kyle Shanahan's doing good overall. They both kind of sucked a little bit on Sunday. It's okay overall. They're doing good. They'll bounce back against the
I actually didn't have that big of a problem with Kyle as it pertains to this game on Sunday. And I'll talk about that later as well. That's a topic for later, and we got to
Yeah.
get through these super chats and these other things. But
Yeah.
I actually didn't have a problem with Kyle in this game in particular, but on the season, it is very clear how dependent he is on a CMC and how this not having CMC there could eventually be a good thing for him. Keith Murphy says, last year we lost to the Broncos, Falcons, and Bears. Cleveland is better than those teams.
True.
Yeah, their defense is elite. But with no Deshaun Watson, no Batonio, no Chubb, I mean, their offense
They still should have won the
great.
damn game.
They
They
still
should have
should have
won
won
it.
the
There's
game.
no
Yeah.
excuse. Yeah.
And it shouldn't
But
have came down to a field goal either. Like, that's also true. Dave Barclay says, we've all yelled, use CMC less and Mason more. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right about that, Dave. We have all said it. This is not a unique to any one person. We've all said it. So
It was only me. Only me.
it was
Dave.
only Ryan. Yes, Ryan
Yes.
is the only one, but we all agreed with Ryan.
Yeah.
Keith says, I'm not worried about Brock. I've seen Brady win 13-10 and Vinatieri foot after playing a horrible game. I'm worried about the kicker. Oh, we're going to get there. We are going to get there. Keith says, if CMC were meth, Kyle would be a meth.
He would live in Bakersfield. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everyone that lives in Bakersfield. I apologize. I didn't mean that personally.
Oh, man. Keith, you're killing me. You're killing me. I don't know much about Bakersfield, so that one went over my head. But
I think you can imagine based on my comment, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. Portland. There we go. Keith says, I'd be tempted to sit CMC through the bye. Yep, we just talked about that. Ryan seems to be leaning that way. I don't mind the Bengals game. I definitely would sit him this week. Dave says, I'd sit CMC through the bye as well. All right, you guys are all in agreement. Like, let's just get him some rest. All right. Maybe I'm in the minority here. GTC Real says, Monday night Kittle is loading. That's right. It's true. If Kittle's going to show up, it's certainly going to be on a Monday night game. That we do know.
Yes.
Let's talk about Jake Moody. And you wanted to take it a step further. Like, you're going for the jugular with this topic here, Ryan.
Was I?
Yeah, I think so. You might be. I forget we'll see what my thoughts are about it. But the topic is, we could have eased into it and said, are you concerned about Jake Moody, or are you ready to panic on Jake Moody like we did with Purdy? We were much nicer about this topic with Purdy, and I think a lot of that is because we have more confidence in Brock Purdy. You just want to go straight for the jugular and say, was drafting Jake Moody a mistake?
Hey,
there it is. What do you think?
Yeah, it was. Now, let me back down a little bit. Jake Moody could bounce back and be fine. He could bounce back and be fine for the rest of the season, be clutch, all that good stuff. He's a young man. He's a kid, man. I saw him talking after the game. I felt awful for Jake Moody, man. He looks like a little kid. Looked like he's going to cry. I feel
deer in his headlights, man.
Oh, I feel horrible for Jake Moody. I felt bad for coming down on him. But the reality is you could have drafted DeJuan Jones and kept Robbie Gould. You win that game, and you have a future at right tackle. So, yes, it was a mistake for drafting Moody. I would have trusted – we win that game. Robbie Gould kicks that field. Now, he can't kick past 50 yards, but, I mean, who cares, right? In the playoffs, he's money, and that's what it's going to depend on. Right now, if the playoffs started tomorrow, how confident are you in Jake Moody to win the game? I would much rather have DeJuan Jones at right tackle than Colton McKivitz, and I'd much rather have Robbie Gould at kicker than Moody if I'm keeping it a buck. Like, that's how I feel. That's how I felt back then. Maybe Moody will prove me wrong and just ball out the rest of the freaking season. And it becomes irrelevant. But that's how I feel, man. I got to keep it 100 for you.
Well, Ryan, I certainly, after a bad game, I'm not going to change my initial opinion in saying that they shouldn't have drafted him on draft night.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been very consistent on Moody. And even when he played well, I was like, hey, I gave him credit. He played well. But the point is that if you're going to be the highest drafted kicker in the NFL, you can't just be serviceable. You have to be elite. You have to be top 3. And you have to do it for a long time. Now, maybe he'll eventually get there. I'm also not going to write Moody off as if his career is over after this game.
Right.
I'm not going to do that. But I do agree with you in saying, let's assume that Robbie Gould was on this team and he missed those kicks. Okay, let's not give Robbie the benefit of the doubt. Let's say Robbie Gould, first of all, I don't think they would have even attempted the first one. They probably would have punted. But let's say he kicked it, he missed, and he just pushed the next one right. I think we can all sit here today and say, hey, you know what? Frustrating. Maybe you put the loss on Robbie Gould and you're frustrated, what have you. But one thing that you're not doing is saying that you've lost confidence in Robbie Gould or you're concerned about Robbie Gould going forward, because Robbie is possibly a Hall of Fame kicker. So when you're talking about a player like that, the history is there. They've built the cachet. You're going to trust him in the next situation, even though he wasn't good in this one. The problem is with Moody is that he is a rookie with a small sample size. He hadn't kicked a field goal in about 3 weeks. And now he's put in a situation with a game on a line and he doesn't come through. Maybe he'll be fine, but I'm not confident.
Who knows?
You're not confident, clearly.
Yes. And if you re-sign Robbie Gould and he missed that kick and you still drafted DeJuan Jones, okay. Moody missed it. Robbie Gould missed it. But in this scenario, you would have DeJuan Jones at right tackle, who I think is going to be a hell of a right tackle for years to come for the Browns, man. So it just didn't make sense. I think it was a bad move. But, maybe Moody will pull it off. Maybe McKivitz is, an upgrade over Mike McGlinchey and balls out the rest of the year. Who knows? We'll see. But right now, that's how it feels.
All right, Steve. I'm going to disagree with you, and then I'm going to oblige. Steve says, we got over the Trey Lance talk. Let's move on from the Robbie Gould talk, too. The reason we got on from the Trey Lance talk is because Brock Purdy's played well. If Brock Purdy was struggling, do you think the Trey Lance talk would have gone away? Absolutely not. Absolutely, it wouldn't have gone away. So the fact that the kicker's not playing well, that opens the door for the Robbie Gould talk. But let's move on from Robbie Gould and let's just talk in general. The issue I had really wasn't that they could have brought back Robbie Gould. Sure, okay, I even said on draft night, maybe Robbie Gould has priced himself off this team. Okay, but you could have gone a Mason Crosby route. You could have brought in an undrafted free agent kicker to compete with Zane Gonzalez, who later got injured anyways and would have lost the job because of that. And let's not, most kickers in the NFL are undrafted free agents. We're looking at some in the NFL right now that are rookies that were taken either much later or were undrafted that
the Cowboys kicker, right?
Are killing it. Aubrey. He hasn't even missed a kick this year, has he? He's been money from everywhere this whole season. Now he's older, but he's still technically a rookie, I believe. I think he's like 28, but he played a ton of soccer. That's why he's, coming into the league now. He then went to like the XFL or something, kicked for like a small stint, and is in the NFL. Those guys are there every year. Kickers like that exist every single year. The point was that it's all about the value.
Yeah.
And people said, well, if Moody was your guy, you had to get him because the Patriots were going to take him. The Patriots made a mistake drafting a kicker that early too. What has that done for their season? Where are the Patriots at? How many holes did the Patriots have? How many more players could they have drafted or should have drafted than getting a kicker? Just because another team was willing to make a mistake doesn't mean you have to. Like that doesn't mean it's a good draft pick. And it's again, value. Moody might be a good player overall, but it still can be a bad pick because the value. It's if anybody plays fantasy football.
Right. I was just thinking about that. It's like
exactly. Yeah. Value-based drafting. It's all about the value. So if you have a choice between a running back and a receiver that you're drafting, and this running back, it's like, hey, I don't have any running backs. I really need one. But this receiver is valued you're in the 5th round and this receiver's got a value of a 3rd round pick and this running back has a 7th round pick, you don't go with the running back because you need it. You just go with the receiver and take the best player available and figure it out from there. Like, that's what you do.
Or it's
Moody
like
in the 3rd
drafting,
round was always an awful value.
or it's like drafting a quarterback first. My first pick, I'm drafting Patrick Mahomes because I like Patrick Mahomes. He's so good. No, you got to draft some running backs, dude. You want to win your fantasy league, right? So it makes that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. So it's all about the value. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Robbie Gould, Steve. I understand where you're coming from. Like I said, the door's open because Moody isn't playing great right now. But we can remove Robbie Gould. There was plenty of other options that I felt like they should have gone with during that time. And obviously, coming off of a game-winning opportunity, I'm not going to change my opinion then. That would be a weird time to change my opinion. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think drafting Moody was a mistake, not because of the player, but because of the value of said player.
Correct.
For Life Niner says the 49ers offense will come through like, alrighty. Okay. G-Manizers. A bit graphic. Appreciate.
Too early for that, bro.
Yeah. G-Mani. Christmas, my guy. Okay. We just talked about CMC missing time or what we would do with CMC. It does sound like it's a pain tolerance thing. I said I would give him this week and reevaluate. I have no problem if he plays against the Bengals because then they do have a bye week. You said you're willing to shut him down through the bye week and just make sure that he comes out of the bye week fully healthy and back to being as fresh as he can be. Let's assume he does miss time. Let's say he misses not even just this week. He does miss through the bye week. What do the 49ers need to do to be successful without CMC?
Just get everyone involved, man. I honestly think long term, the best thing for the 49ers is sit CMC through the bye week because if you do that, you have a fresh CMC coming into week 10 to finish the last 7-game stretch of the season. You know he's 100% healthy. And in the meantime, you learned how to win without him. The Bengals are not playing that good. The Vikings are not good. You can beat both these teams. You should be able to beat both these teams with the weapons that are on this team. You have Debo, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Jordan Mason. I'm not a big Elijah Mitchell guy right now. I'll be honest. I don't know. I feel like he's kind of toast. Maybe he'll prove me wrong this year. But I really like what I see from Jordan Mason. You have the pieces. You know, you're an offensive genius, Kyle Shanahan. You have a ton of freaking weapons. Win without CMC. Learn how to win without CMC. And then when he comes back, that's icing on the cake. You just won 2 games without CMC. Now CMC comes back. Oh, man, now you're going to be cooking for this last 7-game stretch headed into the playoffs. I think it's smart. I think what they need to do is just figure out how to win without Christian McCaffrey.
So it sounds like you would – the 49ers are going to start Elijah Mitchell. You would start Mason over Mitchell. Am I hearing you correctly?
Based on what I've seen this year, yes. Here's what people need to understand. Jordan Mason has the highest yards per carry out of all the running backs on the 49ers, including CMC.
Mm-hmm.
The 49ers are better off mixing up CMC and Jordan Mason. Even if CMC was healthy right now, they would be smart to mix up Jordan Mason because Jordan Mason runs hard. He's the best runner between the tackles to me on the team over CMC. I'm going to be on it. Like CMC on the outside, I really like CMC better. Jordan Mason up the middle, to me, is the best running back on the team. And if you mix those two guys together, now you're keeping them fresh. You're inflicting pain on the defense because Jordan Mason will run at your ass, right? And you're keeping both guys fresh. So when they are in the game, they're more potent. And so that's what I think they need to be doing regardless of whether CMC is healthy or not. They need to run Jordan Mason a lot more early, first quarter. Give him some touches, man. Mix it up. Every single quarter, Jordan Mason needs to be involved.
You know, it's interesting because I actually think CMC being out puts more stress on the pass game than the run game. Like I think in the pass game, now you still have tons of weapons and you should be able to get it done. But CMC being that last second check down and everybody kind of keying in on him gives everybody the one-on-one matchup. So I think it's going to put more stress on Ayuk and Debo and Kittle to go out and do their thing than it would necessarily Mason or Mitchell. I think Mason or Mitchell can run the ball fine. I agree. I would play Mason more, but either way, like I think they're both pretty dang good and they can run the ball very effectively without CMC. It's just the pass game will be a little bit harder to navigate. Then again, you're playing a bad Vikings defense, so you still should be able to score plenty of points. I don't know. The Bengals are starting to get hot. Burrow's starting to come back into form. The Bengals game without CMC, I think, would be tough. I would still give the edge to the 49ers slightly, but would it even be end of the world if they lost? Let's say CMC sits out these 2 weeks. They beat the Vikings and lose to the Bengals and go into the bye week, and then CMC comes back healthy. Would that really be end of the world having 2 losses going in the bye week, being 6-2? I don't think so.
Not against AFC teams. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I don't think so at all. I mean, if you're 5-2, or what would it be? You would be
6-2.
6-2,
Yeah.
headed in. Coming out of the bye week, headed for the last stretch of the season. There's nothing wrong with that. Selfishly, I'm going to that Bengals game. I hope CNC plays for that reason, just so I can watch them. But I don't. I just think they got to think long term, and I really want Kyle Shanahan to learn to win without CMC again, because they were able to do it without him before. They can do it again, and they have to be prepared for that. As my mom would say, heaven forbid something happens to CMC, right? They got to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and I think what would happen too, and we talked about it, it is very different, and having a player be a part of the game plan, go out mid-game, than knowing he's going to be out all week and preparing as if that is the case. But if you have a situation again, if he misses a couple games here and you've kind of figured out how to game plan without him, if you have a game again where he does go out mid-game, you're not caught with your pants down again the way that offense seemed to be. I mean, they had Brock, I think, had 1 passing yard going into that final drive in the second half. I mean, that's as bad as it could look for an offense. I mean, the offense just could not move the ball. And I think if you add in penalties, they were like minus yards or something going into that final drive or close to it. Like it wasn't good overall. They couldn't move the ball at all. You don't want to have a situation like that going forward where CMC misses, that you just feel like, oh my God, what are we going to do? You have to be confident that you can win without CMC.
And let's not forget, Ray is nice on offense, man. He ran twice. He ran the ball twice, got a first down every time. Also, Ronnie Bell, man. Look, what happened to Ronnie? Let's see a little bit of Ronnie Bell, man. I'm excited about him. The 49ers got a plethora of weapons. They can easily beat both these teams that they're facing without CMC. Maybe not easily. I'm not going to underestimate their opponents, but they can do it.
The Vikings, I think they should be able to beat easily. I do think that the Bengals are tougher. Like I said, I think the Bengals are starting to round into form. We'll see. With CMC, I'm very confident they win that game. Without him, not as confident. But worst case scenario, we're talking about going 1-1 over the next 2 weeks. Should be on paper without CMC. If he is truly hurt and needs that time, I would rather do that, and I'm comfortable doing that, versus letting this linger all season long because you had to beat the Bengals in week 8.
Dude, the Bengals are coming to San Francisco, coming to Santa Clara. Like,
they are.
If you can't beat them at home without CMC, this is the best roster in the NFL. You take CMC off this team, still top 3 roster in the NFL. One thing that surprised me, this is off subject, but one thing that surprised me a little bit, Jess, I want to get your take, is I expected the AFC to just be dominant, over the NFC this year. It's not turning out that way.
No.
The NFC is just as strong as if not stronger than the AFC right now. To be honest, I mean, you got the Lions, the Niners, the Eagles, all 5-1. In the AFC, you just have, what is it? The Dolphins and the Chiefs are 5-1. So the NFC's turned out to be stronger than the AFC, or stronger than I thought they would be, at least.
Yeah, most certainly. And let's see. Soul Certified agrees with you. Richard disagrees with you. He says he hasn't seen anything without McCaffrey. And I think that's what Ryan's point is that they got to figure out how to do it without McCaffrey. They've done it before. They can do it again. Steve M says, got to win the number 1 seed. The Lions' schedule is way too easy. Yeah, I think that's a factor that we didn't really consider, is the Detroit Lions. What if they get the number 1 seed? Because the Eagles' schedule is extremely tough. Like, the 49ers can keep pace, I think, with the Eagles, and especially because they do play them, they can get that tiebreaker back. But losing 4 games might be too much to own the tiebreaker because the Lions might only lose 3. Like they're humming right now, and they do have a pretty easy schedule, at least division wise. I haven't looked through it completely. I'd be lying if I said I had, but if you're saying it's easy, Steve M, I'm going to take your word for it. You're right. Number 1 seed is going to be very important. But would you rather be the number 2 seed and have a fully healthy CMC, or be the number 1 seed and have a laboring CMC? I'll take the number 2 seed and a fully healthy CMC personally.
And I'm not too worried about going into a dome in Detroit, as much as I would like the Eagles. That would scare me more. But it'd be great to be at home, honestly. So, yeah, I mean, but yeah, to answer your question, I'd rather have CMC and be healthy and be the 2 seed.
Yeah, most certainly. Ryan, we're at our hour mark. Thank you so much for being back this week. We'll do it again next week. I will be back tonight, 9:20 p.m. Eastern, with my guy, So Real Sunil. So make sure you keep it tapped in here. Make sure that you tap in over at Ryan's. What's up?
Can I just ask? I'm 280 subscribers away from 6K. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe.
Go subscribe to Ryan's channel and go vote on the poll question that he put in there for today's.
Vote wisely.
Vote wisely. There's only one right answer. I'll just leave it at that. If you haven't seen it, there's only one right answer. All right, Ryan, I'll talk to you soon. Chat, we'll see you tonight. Peace.